The 3rd of October, 1962, 7:42 p.m., Manhattan, New York. Crime boss Tony Salerno was standing outside Rao's restaurant when he raised his hand to hail a yellow taxi, unaware that he was about to take the last ride of his life. The checker cab that pulled up to the curb looked identical to thousands of other New York taxis, and the driver who smiled at him through the passenger window appeared to be just another working-class immigrant trying to make an honest living in America's greatest city. "Where to, boss?" the driver asked in a friendly Brooklyn accent, and Tony gave him an address in Queens where he was supposed to meet with associates from the Gambino family. What Tony didn't know was that the smiling taxi driver worked for Lucky Luciano's organization, that the cab was equipped with hidden restraints and soundproofing, and that instead of driving to Queens, they would be taking a detour to the Hudson River, where Tony's body would join 21 other crime bosses who had made the fatal mistake of getting into one of Lucky's taxis. The yellow cab company wasn't just New York's largest taxi service. It was Lucky Luciano's most efficient killing machine. To understand how Lucky Luciano transformed New York's taxi system into a mobile assassination network, you need to understand the unique advantages that taxicabs offered for criminal operations in early 1960s America. Taxis were universally trusted forms of transportation that passengers entered without suspicion, creating perfect opportunities for abduction and elimination. More importantly, taxi drivers had legitimate reasons to be anywhere in the city at any time, making them virtually invisible to law enforcement surveillance and providing perfect cover for criminal activities. The taxi industry also offered ideal conditions for systematic elimination operations because passengers were isolated in confined spaces with limited escape options. Drivers had complete control over destination and routing decisions, and taxi rides naturally involved movement to secluded locations where criminal activities could be conducted without witnesses or interference. Lucky realized that a taxi operation could provide the perfect combination of accessibility, mobility, and operational security for elimination activities, because passengers voluntarily entered the vehicles and provided information about their destinations, making them completely vulnerable to drivers who had criminal rather than commercial intentions. The inspiration for Lucky's taxi assassination strategy came from his understanding of how the intimate relationship between taxi drivers and passengers created psychological vulnerabilities that could be exploited for criminal purposes, and how the mobility and ubiquity of taxi services made them ideal platforms for systematic elimination operations that could strike anywhere in the city without warning or detection. Lucky had been studying the New York transportation system from his Italian exile since 1961, recognizing that taxi services offered unprecedented opportunities for eliminating enemies through methods that would appear to be random street crimes or mysterious disappearances, while actually being carefully orchestrated assassination operations conducted by drivers who were above suspicion. The establishment of Lucky's taxi empire required extensive preparation and over $4 million in initial investment that was provided through his international criminal network and laundered through legitimate transportation industry investments and municipal licensing procedures that made the taxi operation appear to be a routine business expansion. The taxi operation was structured through Yellow Cab Holdings, a legitimate transportation company that acquired existing taxi licenses and vehicles while establishing new dispatch services and driver recruitment programs that provided perfect cover for Lucky's criminal activities. Meyer Lansky coordinated the American aspects of the taxi operation, working through established connections in New York's transportation industry to obtain the necessary licenses, insurance coverage, and regulatory approvals required for large-scale taxi services. Frank Costello managed the recruitment and training of taxi drivers, ensuring that key personnel could conduct elimination operations while maintaining the appearance of providing professional transportation services to legitimate customers who were unaware of the fleet's criminal purposes. The taxi fleet consisted of 500 yellow checker cabs that were indistinguishable from other New York taxis, but incorporated hidden modifications that could transform routine transportation into deadly traps for passengers who were targeted for elimination. Each taxi was equipped with concealed restraint systems that could immobilize passengers, soundproofing materials that prevented screams from being heard outside the vehicle, and hidden storage compartments for weapons, chemicals, and disposal equipment that could be used during elimination operations. The taxi dispatch system was designed to provide legitimate transportation services to ordinary customers while maintaining special protocols for targeted eliminations that could be activated when specific passengers requested rides to predetermined locations. Most importantly, the taxi operations record-keeping system was designed to create legitimate business documentation for all rides, while concealing the true destinations and outcomes of elimination operations that resulted in passenger deaths rather than successful transportation. The recruitment of qualified taxi drivers required careful selection of individuals who possessed the necessary driving skills, while being vulnerable to recruitment for criminal activities through financial incentives, legal problems, or personal circumstances that made them dependent on Lucky's organization. Salvatore Romano was recruited as the primary elimination specialist for Lucky's taxi operation. Romano was a 34-year-old professional driver with 15 years of experience in New York's transportation industry. But he was also struggling with gambling debts and family obligations that made him receptive to opportunities for additional income. Romano's recruitment was accomplished through Lucky's associates, who approached him with an offer to become a senior driver for a new taxi service that would cater to New York's Italian American community and provide premium transportation services with particular attention to customer safety and comfort. Romano was initially unaware that yellow cab holdings would be used for criminal purposes, but his financial desperation and professional skills made him increasingly receptive to requests for services that went beyond normal taxi operations. The transition from legitimate transportation services to elimination operations was gradual, beginning with requests for Romano to provide information about passenger behavior, popular destinations, and the operational aspects of how taxi services could be used for activities that required privacy and mobility. As Romano became more comfortable with information sharing, the requests became more specific and more obviously connected to criminal planning. Romano was asked to explain how passengers could be controlled during rides, how routes could be altered without passenger awareness, and how taxi operations could be used to transport individuals to locations where they wouldn't be found. Vincent Torino was recruited as Romano's partner and backup driver for complex elimination operations. Torino was a 28-year-old former truck driver who had experience with heavy vehicle operation and cargo handling, making him ideally qualified for operations that required transportation and disposal of bodies after elimination procedures. Anthony Benedetto was recruited to manage the taxi dispatch operations. Benedetto's position allowed him to coordinate elimination assignments with driver schedules and passenger requests, ensuring that targeted individuals would be assigned to drivers who were prepared to conduct elimination operations rather than provide legitimate transportation. The taxi elimination operations began with detailed surveillance and preparation that identified target individuals, analyzed their transportation patterns, and developed specific abduction plans that would ensure successful elimination while maintaining the appearance of routine taxi services, or random street crimes. Tony Salerno's elimination was planned as the inaugural operation for Lucky's taxi assassination program. Salerno was a powerful crime boss who had been challenging Lucky's influence over New York organized crime and building alliances with families in other cities that threatened to undermine Lucky's control over American criminal operations. Salerno was intelligent, well protected, and normally traveled with armed bodyguards who made traditional assassination attempts extremely difficult to execute successfully. However, Salerno's personal security protocols included regular use of taxi services for transportation to meetings where he didn't want to be seen arriving in distinctive vehicles that could be traced to his organization. The operation against Tony Salerno was initiated through Yellow Cab Holdings' dispatch service, which had been monitoring calls from restaurants and social clubs where Salerno conducted regular business activities. When Salerno called for a taxi from Rao's restaurant on the 3rd of October 1962, the dispatch system automatically assigned the call to Salvatore Romano, who was positioned nearby and prepared to conduct the elimination operation. Romano arrived at Rao's restaurant at 7:42 p.m., driving a standard yellow cab that appeared identical to other New York taxis, but was actually equipped with the hidden modifications that would allow him to control and eliminate Salerno during what would appear to be a routine taxi ride. Salerno entered the taxi without suspicion, providing Romano with a Queens address where he was scheduled to meet with associates from the Gambino family for discussions about territorial arrangements and business coordination. Romano acknowledged the destination and began driving toward Queens, engaging Salerno in casual conversation about traffic conditions, weather, and other topics that would appear normal for taxi driver passenger interactions, while actually serving to relax Salerno and reduce his alertness to potential danger. The route Romano selected appeared to be a reasonable path to the Queens destination, but actually included detours that would take the taxi to secluded areas where elimination operations could be conducted without interference from other traffic or potential witnesses. Approximately 10 minutes into the ride, while traveling through an industrial area with minimal traffic and no pedestrians, Romano activated the hidden restraint system that immobilized Salerno in the taxi's back seat. The restraint system used concealed cables and locking mechanisms that were integrated into the seat construction, making it impossible for passengers to detect the modifications through casual observation, but allowing drivers to activate complete physical control over passengers through hidden switches. Once Salerno was restrained, Romano explained the elimination procedure while continuing to drive toward the disposal location that had been prepared for the operation. "Mr. Salerno, I want you to understand that this is nothing personal," Romano said while adjusting the rear-view mirror to maintain eye contact with his passenger. "Mr. Luciano has determined that your continued activities are incompatible with his business interests, and he has selected a method of elimination that will ensure your disappearance while maintaining complete operational security." Romano continued his explanation while driving toward the Hudson River disposal site, describing how the elimination would be accomplished and how Salerno's disappearance would be handled by the taxi service's incident management procedures. "Your associates will be told that you never arrived for your meeting in Queens. The taxi company will report that you were dropped off at your requested destination without incident. Your body will never be found, and there will be no evidence connecting your disappearance to any criminal activity." The elimination was completed at a secluded pier facility on the Hudson River, where Romano had access to boat transportation and disposal equipment that could ensure complete destruction of physical evidence. Salerno was eliminated through suffocation using specialized equipment that left no physical trauma or chemical residue that could be detected through autopsy procedures, ensuring that if his body were ever discovered, the cause of death would be impossible to determine. The body disposal was accomplished through weighted submersion in the Hudson River, at a location where current patterns and depth conditions would prevent recovery, while ensuring that decomposition would eliminate any remaining physical evidence. Romano returned to taxi service operations within 3 hours of the elimination, resuming normal passenger transportation and maintaining detailed dispatch records that documented his location and activities throughout the period when Salerno's disappearance occurred. The cover story for Salerno's disappearance was provided through Yellow Cab Holdings' customer service department, which reported that Salerno had been transported to his requested destination in Queens and had exited the taxi without incident at approximately 8:30 p.m. The report was supported by fabricated dispatch records and driver logs that created a complete documentation trail for a legitimate taxi ride that appeared to have concluded successfully with passenger arrival at the requested destination. When Salerno failed to arrive for his scheduled meeting with Gambino family associates, his disappearance was initially attributed to possible detention by law enforcement, personal emergency, or decision to avoid the meeting for strategic reasons. The investigation into Salerno's disappearance focused on his known enemies, recent business conflicts, and potential law enforcement surveillance that might have prevented him from attending the scheduled meeting. No investigation was conducted of Yellow Cab Holdings or the taxi ride that had been Salerno's final journey, because the taxi service's records indicated that he had completed his transportation successfully and the ride had concluded normally. The success of the Tony Salerno elimination operation led to the expansion of Lucky's taxi assassination strategy to target additional crime figures throughout New York, who posed threats to his organization or could provide valuable assets through elimination and succession procedures. Over the next 12 months, Yellow Cab Holdings systematically eliminated 26 major crime figures through taxi operations that appeared to be routine transportation services, but actually were carefully orchestrated abduction and elimination procedures. Vincent Rao was eliminated in November 1962 during what appeared to be a taxi ride to a business meeting in Manhattan, but actually was an elimination operation that resulted in his disappearance and presumed death through disposal in the East River. Joseph Colombo was eliminated in January 1963 during a taxi ride from LaGuardia Airport that appeared to be routine transportation from air travel, but actually was an abduction operation that concluded with his elimination and disposal through cremation at a facility controlled by Lucky's organization. Albert Anastasia's nephew Michael was eliminated in March 1963 during what appeared to be a taxi ride to a family gathering in Brooklyn, but actually was an elimination operation that resulted in his disappearance and body disposal through acid dissolution procedures. Thomas Iboli was eliminated in May 1963 during a taxi ride that appeared to be transportation to a restaurant meeting, but actually was an elimination operation conducted while the taxi was en route to a disposal facility in New Jersey. By June 1963, Lucky Luciano's taxi operation had eliminated 31 major crime figures, while maintaining Yellow Cab Holdings as a legitimate transportation service that generated substantial revenue and provided excellent customer satisfaction ratings from passengers who were unaware of the fleet's criminal activities. The taxi operations had also provided Lucky with comprehensive intelligence about the movement patterns, meeting locations, and personal habits of virtually every major crime figure in New York, because taxi dispatch records revealed detailed information about destinations, scheduling, and association patterns. More importantly, the taxi strategy had created a climate of psychological terror among surviving crime figures, who realized that they could be eliminated during routine transportation activities by drivers they had no reason to suspect or fear. The psychological impact of the taxi eliminations was particularly devastating, because they exploited fundamental assumptions about urban transportation and service industry relationships that made it psychologically impossible for potential victims to take effective protective measures without completely abandoning normal business activities. Federal law enforcement agencies investigated the unusual number of disappearances among organized crime figures, but found no evidence of systematic criminal activity, noting that the disappearances appeared to be individual incidents with no apparent connection to specific criminal organizations or elimination methods. The FBI's investigation concluded that the disappearances were consistent with normal patterns of criminal violence and territorial disputes, rather than evidence of coordinated elimination operations conducted through legitimate business enterprises. New York Police Department investigations focused on known criminal associates and traditional rivalry patterns, finding no evidence of connections to legitimate businesses or service industries that might be involved in systematic elimination operations. The taxi industry investigation by municipal transportation authorities found no evidence of irregularities in Yellow Cab Holdings operations, noting that the company maintained excellent safety records, customer satisfaction ratings, and compliance with all applicable regulations. Insurance investigations examined the pattern of disappearances, but found no evidence of fraud or suspicious circumstances, noting that the missing individuals had not filed insurance claims or taken actions that would suggest planned disappearances rather than involuntary elimination. Lucky Luciano had created the perfect elimination system, a legitimate transportation service that eliminated enemies while providing excellent customer service, maintaining regulatory compliance, and generating substantial profits that could be used to fund additional criminal operations. From his exile in Italy, Lucky had demonstrated that the ultimate criminal weapon was the systematic corruption of everyday service industries that were so integrated into urban life that they were completely invisible to law enforcement, surveillance, and investigation. The taxi operations established Lucky as the most sophisticated criminal strategist in history, someone who could weaponize the basic infrastructure of urban transportation while maintaining the appearance of providing essential community services. Yellow Cab Holdings continued operating as both a legitimate taxi service and a strategic elimination facility until Lucky's death in January 1962, when control of the operation was transferred to his designated successors, who maintained the fleet's dual purpose while expanding services to include additional transportation and logistics capabilities. The taxi fleet's success established the template for criminal operations that exploited service industry relationships and customer trust, demonstrating that true criminal power came from the ability to corrupt legitimate businesses while maintaining their public reputation and community integration. Lucky Luciano had proven that the most effective criminal strategies were often the ones that appeared to serve the public, while actually serving the criminal interests of those who controlled them through systematic corruption of trusted institutions. On the 3rd of October, 1962, Tony Salerno hailed a taxi for what he thought would be a routine ride to a business meeting in Queens, but instead became the victim of the most sophisticated mobile assassination operation ever devised, proving that in Lucky Luciano's New York, even the most trusted services could be instruments of death.